All right, moving right along. How's everybody doing? All right, so quick announcement. So we have Charlie Fink coming up next. Right afterwards, we'll be having a coffee break out in the expo hall, sponsored by Niantic, so definitely stick around for that. So up next is Charlie Fink. You all know him, you'll love him. He is an XR consultant, columnist, and author. He writes for Forbes, and he's been the author of many AR-enabled books. Been part of the AWE community and the XR community for years. Everybody give it a hand for Charlie Fink.
Hey there, everybody. Good to see you this morning. Great to be back in the real to talk about the metaverse. I had a little trouble with this presentation because, of course, the company formerly known as Facebook had a huge announcement 2 weeks ago, which sent me scrambling to redo my entire presentation. So hopefully I've done it justice, and I'll try and leave some time for Q&A. You guys know who I am, so I won't dwell on this slide. I'm lecturing at Chapman University now, so I've been practicing for this presentation for the past 24 months. As you guys know, or many of you know, I wrote an AR-enabled book called Charlie Fink's Metaverse that was written in 2018 and released on the 1st of January at CES 2018. You know, we've all been talking about the metaverse for 25 years or so. It's a pretty important theoretical concept, primarily in VR. And so I called my book Charlie Fink's Metaverse mostly as a metaphor, right? It isn't about the metaverse per se. I wish it was, because I'd be selling a lot more copies right now. But instead, what it says is everything is connected through my personal experience, right? If the metaverse is everything connected, this was everything connected through my experience. I was touching this thing while I was talking. Yeah, here we go. So, I mean, and there was a metaverse, a real world metaverse, and we can talk about the qualities that a metaverse has. We will talk about that. But many of those qualities Second Life had when it was launched in 2003. And if you're old enough to remember, in the 2000s, it was a phenomenon with tens of millions of users. It settled back down to a community of about 700,000 people. And of course, then, at the beginning of the decade, why does this thing keep scrolling? I'm not pressing, honestly. A seminal book came out that was an extension to a lot of the ideas in Snow Crash, but much easier to understand and much more literal, if you will. A linear story takes place inside of the world built by a video game company. I'm sure Ernie Klein wasn't thinking about, see, I didn't touch it, it just advanced. I'm sure Ernie Klein wasn't thinking about Fortnite when he wrote that book, but certainly Fortnite is an example of a video game that could become the metaverse. Right? Important distinction between the metaverse and a metaverse. One capitalized, one lowercase, meaning there are many. See, this thing keeps advancing without me doing anything technical, guys, backstage. Why is it scrolling? Thank you. The metaverse has been in the news a lot in the past 12 months, not just because of Facebook, although Mark Zuckerberg, when Oculus was acquired by Facebook, said that he wanted a metaverse play, that he wanted a platform play. So this is not new from them. And of course, you know, it's been in the news. I've been lecturing about it. GamesBeat, look at that, January of this year. Okay, Epic Games raises $1 billion from Sony and others and says that the express purpose of that money is to build the metaverse. So what is the metaverse? Matthew Ball, a fantastic writer, a former Amazon strategy executive, now runs the Meta ETF, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and it's a bucket of all the stocks we know and love, you know, that are involved in the metaverse directly or tangentially. So Matthew laid out really what I had been talking about in my lectures about the metaverse before the metaverse was mattering again. And he pulled together a lot of the concepts that I thought were key, right? So it's one of those things that you read and you go, wow, I wish I had written this. Because a lot of these ideas were out there and wanted to be synthesized. So the qualities that I'm outlining here are the things you would expect, right? You would have a fully embodied presence, whether it's like in a video game, 3D viewed through a 2D screen, which is what Second Life is, or whether it was a fully immersed VR kind of metaverse. You would want the worlds to be contiguous, right? You could transport from one place to another, from Fortnite to Roblox. You would have an unlimited number of participants, digital ownership of land, and a meta layer, which Facebook says it's working on, that would both manage your identity, which is super important, right? Your avatar is the most important asset in a or the metaverse. And with that avatar travels your crypto, your wallet, your costumes, right? Your robot disguise, whatever it is. But you still need to have one identity. So that meta layer, if you will, has not yet been built. And I hope when it is built that we manage to form, that the stakeholders manage to form some endowed not-for-profit like ICANN that can manage that rather than leaving it to one company that we should trust with our identity, because we know from experience that that hasn't turned out too well. So then, as I said, Facebook set out to blow up my presentation, and they went all in on the metaverse in a rather extraordinary way. So first of all, they changed their name to Meta. It's going to take me a long time to call Facebook Meta. I feel like, in a way, it's a capitulation, but it is reality. They are investing a ridiculous, unheard of amount of money in the metaverse. They view it as an extension of their social philosophy of connecting people, and people are the killer app, so they're not wrong in that. They're buying their most important developers. As I said, they're trying to create technology to glue the metaverse together. And all in all, the 75-minute movie that they put out 2 weeks ago was pretty stunning and exciting, even if it was all special effects. And of course, as I said, they want to be a platform, right? They don't want to be dependent on app stores and at the mercy of Microsoft and others. And Mark, to his credit, right, these are some of the most important issues, right? As I said, you know, the ownership of your identity. Where is your spawn point into the metaverse? Super important, probably the most valuable place. Remember in the Ready Player One movie, they're all walking along, he's next to a giant unicorn, and everybody's wearing different avatars. So that kind of presence, by the way, I don't think that kind of presence is required to be in the or a metaverse. As many other speakers have said, and it's absolutely true, you cannot tie the metaverse to a head-mounted display or any device, right? It needs to be device agnostic, even if the experience in VR is way better and different than the experience on iOS. I'll give you an example. Rec Room was doing very well in VR. They went to game consoles, and they went to smartphones, first iOS and then Android, and they grew by 1,000%. And what they find is their users are using it in VR and then later accessing it via a smartphone. And that is what led to the explosion of usage on their platform. Despite Facebook's definitive movie, there are lots of stakeholders and lots of companies that have a very different opinion about what the metaverse is and who's going to have a stake in it. Primarily, I'm looking at you, Microsoft. They came out the week after Facebook's announcement and reminded us that Facebook does not own the Office. Microsoft has 250 million users of Microsoft Office. It is built on the Windows 10 security infrastructure. So the number of companies that are going to pivot from that to using Horizon Workrooms, I would imagine, is small. They're integrating, you know, what they've done with Mesh is they've created a place where people in AR or people in VR or people on Teams can all meet. So it's pretty interesting giving people on Mesh avatars so that even without being in VR, you get the sense of being virtually present and represented by with a graphic representation of you. Epic's Metaverse, this one was tough because Epic has really been a bit slippery here, but here are some of the key concepts that they are calling out as their metaverse. But as I said, is it metaverse capital M or metaverse small m? Right? Because you look at some of these social places, and let's take Roblox, although many of them have some kind of a digital currency, right? You have to have a creator economy. All these sites are built on user-generated content, so you need to encourage content creators to build on your platform. In fact, I believe that world builders will be the new YouTube streaming celebrities, and that these sites will actually compete for the best builders with financial guarantees that we're similarly seeing to PewDiePie and other people who are commanding tens of thousands of dollars as advances from Twitch and Facebook and YouTube as they try and establish their streaming businesses. Roblox has an economy. Their economy is a little different because it can be exchanged for cash. By the way, that's also true of the digital currency in Second Life, right? Second Life is registered as a bank. And having a functioning economy is critically important to most metaverse, small m, social sites like these, right? So we have many metaverses, small m, and one metaverse, big M, except the big M metaverse is still largely a theoretical concept. So before 2 weeks ago and before Niantic's announcement of their new software platform, no one really understood how the physical world or the digital twin of the physical world was going to fit inside of a metaverse. And it's still not entirely clear, although through Microsoft Mesh and Niantic's new Lighthouse Lightship, we get a idea of how it will slowly be drawn into this world. Snow Crash puts forth a VR AR metaverse where you flow seamlessly through the digital twin of the real world and the world constructed out of fantasy and out of bits. Pretty interesting, super confusing. No one really talks about that. I guess that's okay. The role of AR in the metaverse, though, I think is Microsoft Mesh has really nailed it. We'll see some new stuff coming this year, so it is far from settled. Right? Here's the Facebook movie showing how you might move between video and AR and VR and bring an AR object into a VR space where people on video, and it's about super metaversey. I love this sequence in the movie. Of course, none of this technology has been invented yet, but it's a great idea from a company that has the wherewithal to realize it. And they Workrooms, is using MR, right? You can use your actual keyboard and bring the screen from your PC into the workroom. That's pretty amazing, really amazing. So they've got some great technology. As I said, this doesn't really stand a chance of being anything much, in my opinion, but as a demonstration of the technology that they are developing, I thought it was one of the most impressive things I've seen this year. So again, your identity, your avatar, you're connected to the outside world while you're in the metaverse on some greater or lesser extent immersed in it. But for me in VR, I always want to know what time it is. I always want to know, want to get my messages. I want the worlds to merge in that way. So that is a way that I suppose taking the broadest possible definition of AR and calling a smartphone AR and bringing it into the simulation, I think, is critical. And of course, the digital currency, which we don't yet have. We still don't have microtransactions. For God's sakes, after 30 years, we don't have microtransactions. What the heck? So the simplest building block we don't yet have. Is crypto the answer to that? I mean, maybe. Are you going to do a lot of 10-cent transactions on a blockchain? Oof, a lot of mining, a lot of computing there. Cross-platform avatars. So as I said, if the avatar is the most important asset in the metaverse, and that avatar or your identity, I don't want to hang it up on avatars. You might have many avatars, right? But you have one identity. And let me just say this about identity, because I think it's a really, really important concept. In the metaverse, no one else should own your identity. but you should only have one identity. And if you have 50 identities, the way people do on the internet, where you can't tell a bot from a person anymore, we will replicate every mistake we made building the internet on the metaverse. In fact, I think that is the likely outcome, because I think probably 3/4 of you here are libertarians and think that Charlie is a Nazi for suggesting that your presence has to be regulated. Sorry. Ready Player Me, great idea. They're in 400 games and websites. Again, you can construct your avatar. There's nothing attached to the avatar, right? It's just an avatar. It doesn't have your wallet. It doesn't have a wardrobe. But it's the beginning of the idea that you would have one identity across multiple platforms. Part of Epic's metaverse strategy is MetaHuman Creator. You can create incredible avatars. If photorealistic avatars become a thing, MetaHuman Creator could certainly be a part of it. Facebook bought a company called Codec that does photorealistic avatars. In this case, an avatar that looks like you. We see that on some sites like Spatial. I don't know whether we will ever be in a place to have photorealistic avatars. I know that it vexes a lot of companies. Maybe 5G will change that. But this is definitely, in terms of things being fantasies inside of the Facebook movie, this is probably the biggest fantasy, right? I mean, it's the amount of technology on both sides of the equation. It just hasn't been invented yet, right? There's no camera capturing her, right? So she's got to be reconstructed somehow, photorealistically, with, I guess, the glasses that she's wearing completely replicating her expressions and eye contact. Eye contact, very big problem in the metaverse. We can simulate it. I think Altspace has done a fantastic job, as has Meta with the Horizons avatars. These are breakthroughs. There's blinking, simulated eye contact, but it is not eye contact, and that is a very big problem that needs to be solved. Let me use Spaces, which got acquired by Apple. Clearly, Apple, again, trying to figure out what telepresence looks like, and so they thought maybe the Spaces guys have some of the skills and ideas they need to bring that off. Apple has yet to play its hand, so we're hearing a lot from Meta, but this is the elephant in the room. I love this Apple Glass concept. I've been using it for 5 years. Just love it. Here's one to go with it. There is a consumer HoloLens, I understand, and a fairly big team at Microsoft working on this project. Don't know whether it'll ever happen, but pretty interesting. Of course, the most anticipated AR headset, certainly a company that's always had a big presence here at AWE, and that's coming out soon. One thing about AR glasses, I still, again, bring the hate bombs. I still don't know what the application is for an all-day, everyday wearable, but I do know the two things that it would have to make me buy one at whatever price. One is it has to use this 400-year-old technology that I'm wearing on my face now because I have really bad eyesight. And the other thing it needs to do is telepresence. So if you ask me what are the two key things you're going to see in the Apple device, it'll be those two things. Obviously much, much more. But again, without these, they don't have a chance. Would I wear them all day, every day? Well, I wear these things. So it's a different approach. So let me conclude the way I started my first book, with a few things that I know are true. And listen, it's taken me the better part of 40 years to learn how true these things are. And I repeat them all the time, right? You want those all day, every day wearable glasses. It has to take what I'm already doing, like vision correction, and make it much, much better, right? There's this idea, if you could use retina scanning to understand not only my prescription, but the context of where I am, what am I doing, am I driving at night, am I reading in the dark, and the glasses, unlike photo-sensitive lenses, will adjust exactly for that context. $2,000 or $3,000 doesn't sound like that much. Again, tautological. Why do we look at our phones 400 times a day? It's because we're connecting with other people. And then finally, the first time I heard this, funny, was at AWE in 2016. Somebody at Microsoft said it. And man, is this true, right? I mean, we all said those of us who were working on the internet in the 90s. It's going to change everything. It's going to change e-commerce. It's going to change the way we live. Computers are going to be, you know, the size of a pack of cigarettes. And damn, all that stuff happened. It took 30 years. So to all you young people in the audience working on AR and VR, someday you will be me. So that's what I've got to say about the metaverse. Thank you for listening. We got about a little less than 5 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to talk about any metaversal concept.
Yeah, so everyone, if you have questions for Charlie, feel free to come forward. We have mics up here on either side. Ask him the hardest questions about the metaverse. I guess, Charlie, just before someone comes up, my first question to you is, what would your avatar look like, or what your dream avatar in the metaverse?
I'm boring. My avatar looks like me.
Well, you've got a great look.
Sounds like me, and usually has a little badge that says Charlie Fink over my head. So for those of you who have run into me in VR, my students laugh because I take them across all these different platforms. We go from Rec Room to Engage to Spatial, and they're like, "You look the same in every."
Why break what doesn't work, right? The look works.
I'm used to being me.
All right, first question up here, yeah.
Hello, my name is Don, and my question for you, first off, thank you for this presentation. I was going to ask, do you think that there's going to be just one metaverse, many metaverses, somewhere in between? Like, what's your feeling on that?
I think the small M metaverse is where we are. We don't yet have the technology, so it's not like we have a choice. So we're in small M metaverse. Obviously, Facebook is going to have a very big imprint, so their small M is going to be bigger than Rec Room's small M. But I just don't see any way of Microsoft and Facebook and Apple playing together right now. Eventually, within the next 30 years, yes, they'll have to. In the near term, the next 5 years, there's no way, in my opinion.
So many for now.
Many metaverses or small M metaverses is where we are right now.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, sir, over here.
Probably related. Say you're an internet entrepreneur back in the 90s. When
Yeah, I was at AOL in the 90s, sorry.
ICANN was invented. AOL, yeah, right. By a bunch of other people that weren't a big business at the time invented ICANN.
Yes.
Novel statement about avatars and identity should be controlled by an ICANN type function. Is there any possibility of that in your mind?
Well, there are a bunch of smaller organizations that are trying to be that, and any one of them could be embraced by a consortium. But what I would like to see happen is probably a guarantee that it won't happen. But I think that the players who have a stake in this metaverse and in transitioning from each different realm would endow an independent not-for-profit to manage identity on the metaverse. So that to me would be the ideal outcome. It would be independent. It would be fully funded from the beginning and independent. That would be better than the government managing identity. That would be better than the individual small M metaverse companies managing identity. There are probably better solutions to that, but that's the one that jumps into my mind.
Cool.
Yes, miss over here.
Hi. If we do have one metaverse, what do you think the likelihood is that we'll have a dark metaverse? And if so, what do you think the terrible things are that people will be doing on it?
Oh, I took out a slide which was all the unintended consequences of the metaverse, because you did not want to do a downer of a presentation, right? And also, it's easy to bash Facebook. I mean, it's just so easy to bash them. Every time somebody said AR or transparency, AI or transparency in their movie, I kind of cringed because I'm so hyper aware of their mismanagement of unintended consequences. Unintended consequences move fast and break things. Yeah, that happened, and it probably would have happened to any of us running a similar type company in that context. But their reaction to those unintended consequences has largely been reprehensible. And so it really makes you wonder if we're on our way to replicating all the problems that we created on the internet, right? Again, I talked about multiple identities. That destruction of identity on the internet has led to a lack of individual responsibility that is destroying the internet. And can you imagine in cyberspace if you're surrounded by avatars and you don't know which one is a real person? might be problematic. So there are a lot of pratfalls waiting for us, a dark metaverse. Hadn't thought about that, but absolutely. All the sins of the current internet are poised to follow us into the metaverse.
We got time for one more quick question, and then we'll have the coffee break afterwards.
Yeah, I'll be hanging out at the coffee if you want to talk more.
Sounds good, sounds good. Samuel Helverson here from Northrop Grumman. My question is, what are we doing as a community, AWE, to influence the transgression of the metaverse?
Great question. I mean, sometimes a question is just a question. I think that's a question we all should be asking. But I don't have an answer other than sort of lobbying for the things I believe might help us create a better metaverse.
Right. I think we have probably the greatest minds in the world here who are interested in VR and AR who are attending this conference. We have people from all over the world coming here. And I think there's no better place, there's no better time for us to pick up, you know, the ideas and the beliefs and everything, and how we can make a metaverse that not substantially increases what we're trying to do as a humanity, but how we can also build on that and becomes a foundation to build up from there.
Hear, hear. And let me conclude with something that John Hankey said as he was leaving the stage yesterday, which I think is so true. Let's work together to build a world that we want to live in, not escape from.
All right. Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Charlie. All right, so now we have a short break. We have a coffee break, a bunch of stations outside in the hall, all sponsored by Niantic, so thank you for Niantic for sponsoring that. We'll be back here at 10:50. We have a great talk about how Disney and Marvel are using augmented reality to power their experiences, so come back for that. See you guys then.